element of that in this place today is that the government needs to understand that it is Parliament that makes the rules. It is Parliament that can call for documents, and it is Parliament that ultimately that Prime Minister...
All right. Okay. Here we go. What is up? What is up? Just fixing the title. Still talking about the SDTC. Here we are again. House of Commons proceedings as per usual on Thursday.
Because I saw how it was that Prime Minister, when the We Charity scandal was underway in the midst of COVID, that he prorogued Parliament. After saying that he wouldn't for so many years, he prorogued Parliament the day the documents were sent to the clerk of that committee. And for Canadians watching, proroguing Parliament puts a stop on committee activities. That Prime Minister prorogued Parliament to cover up his family's involvement with an organization that would have got hundreds of millions of dollars in sole source contracts across this country. The lengths to which he goes to cover up the corruption is astounding. So forgive me when I say I have my doubts that they'll do the right thing. But that is where Parliament steps in. Parliament has the ability. And now I understand from media reports that there's some dissension in the Liberal ranks. That there are some MPs that are actually figuring out that it's MPs that are elected to the House of Commons and not governments. It is MPs that make up a party that then forms a government. And it's almost hard to believe that I have to explain these basic principles to my colleagues across the way. So I'm glad, in a sense, that they're waking up and realizing that there is that ability they have to stand up for their constituents. But I would urge them as well when it comes to the debate before the House. Their unwillingness to take a stand, to allow Parliament to get the documents and the evidence that is required. And according to a whistleblower, an SDTC whistleblower, Madam Speaker, and I'll quote, "I think the Auditor General's investigation was more of a cursory review. I don't think the goal and mandate of the Auditor General's office is to look into criminality. I'm not surprised by the fact that they haven't found anything criminal because they're not looking for intent. If their investigation was focused on intent, of course they would find criminality." That's a whistleblower, put their career on the line in order to tell the story of what these Liberals have been up to. So, Madam Speaker, as my speech comes to a close, this is a plea to all members of this place, but in particular...
All right, so as they continue going on in circles about the SDTC, I want to share this with everybody here. Our government is promoting hiring from overseas when unemployment rate is at a 6.5% and there is no housing. The main important things here are highlighted in yellow, one of them being express entry and pathways to permanent residence. Express entry. Like we're a fucking Disney theme park that you can buy an express pass for, a fast pass, to come into our country. Okay, this is the government at its finest. Guidance and resources available to employers. So as soon as you get in the country, there's a list of jobs waiting for you. This is literally the IRCC itself.
Simple.
So take a look at that.
Release the documents so that the investigation can be done.
And then something a little more lighthearted, a little more on the meme side here. Kamala Harris posted this video demonizing Trump, calling him the funny mustache man from World War II, essentially, and all that stuff. And basically, she got ratioed by the Captain of Gondor absolutely ripping a heater, and it got more likes. People can see they are desperate and that they are going to lose. This is American politics right now at its finest. Kamala Harris's actual Twitter page or Twitter account getting ratioed by Lord of the Rings memes. All right, let's get back to the CPAC.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to invite Canadians to be woke. Woke to the disingenuous narrative being put forward by the Conservative Party. The RCMP says they have the documents they need. The RCMP has the ability to ask for further documents directly and not have them spoon-fed through Parliament. The Speaker has said the proper transit of the documents being requested would go to a standing committee. And it's my understanding that that's precisely what the government is prepared to do. All that then, why are the Conservatives burning up now 3 weeks of parliamentary time on something that, a proposition that's totally improper?
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Madam Speaker, here we go again. We have a member of the Liberal Party that is somehow suggesting that Parliament shouldn't be doing its job. Now, here's the facts. At any point in time, a majority of the House could in fact shut down this debate, but they haven't. Because there is, I think, an agreement amongst certainly a majority of members in this House that the release of these documents is that important to this institution and its ability to function properly. Now, the RCMP itself, in fact, I was flipping through and I couldn't find the letter right in front of me, but the RCMP itself did say that it has some of the documents, but it does not have all of them, Madam Speaker. And the fact that this government is unwilling to be transparent and forthright with that information, I would suggest speaks to that culture of corruption and the fact that it looks like there is a cover-up before us. But what's interesting, Madam Speaker, is Conservatives are saying, look, we don't want to conduct the investigation. We want to simply ensure that the RCMP has everything they need to conduct the investigation themselves. Madam Speaker, it seems to me that that's just common sense. What are the Liberals hiding?
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I've had the privilege of serving with the honourable member, and despite our political differences, I do think that there are areas of common ground, particularly around process, procedure, and integrity. And he spoke in his opening remarks. He said that this House has been seized with this issue. Let's talk about that for a moment, Madam Speaker. The question I want to put to the honourable member is who is seizing this House? When he talks about what they put forward a motion. And I don't know, we'll have to go back to the answer and see how many times we had to explain it to them. They put forward a motion to go to proc. I know him to be an honourable man. Will the honourable member please rise, just come clean with Canadians, and let them know that indeed it is the Conservatives who are permanently putting this House seized on this issue by filibustering their own motion.
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I have enjoyed working, despite our political differences, with that member. And what I find very, very interesting, Madam Speaker, is at any point in time, the government, with the support of one of the opposition parties, and it won't be the Conservatives, we've made that very, very clear, and they could put an end to this debate. They could invoke closure on this debate. But thus far, that hasn't happened. So it is, I believe, such an important issue that we need to continue to ensure that we bring to light and give the opportunity for the Liberals to simply do the right thing. Release the documents. And when it comes to those who are engaging in debate on the subject, Madam Speaker, it's certainly not only Conservatives. There is members of every political party that are asking questions, providing commentary, and even in some cases giving speeches, Madam Speaker. So to suggest that it is only Conservatives that are holding this up, and I enjoyed the opportunity this morning, in addition to the debate that we have here before us, and a very important discussion on safe sport as well, so it's not like we're also not talking about other important issues facing so many Canadians.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask my colleague if he could explain to the people watching today, if our leader did go through the security check, he would be gagged. Can you please explain that the only person in this Parliament that can expose those names is the Prime Minister? Can you let the people of Canada know that?
Remind the honourable member that she's to address questions and comments directly through the chair and not directly to the members. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, it's interesting because the members of the Liberal Party have taken great pains to politicize something that initially the Prime Minister said he didn't want to politicize, and that was the issues surrounding foreign interference and secrecy and getting top secret security clearance. But it was the Prime Minister at the Hogue Inquiry that even admitted to getting too political, I believe, was his reference when he had taken the stand there. But what's interesting, and my colleague from King Vaughan makes a very interesting point. The Prime Minister doesn't actually have security clearance. Now, it's interesting because many Liberals may not realize that, but he is given access to top secret information because he is the leader of government. That's the constitutional tradition that our Parliament holds to. So when it comes to the gag order, there are different mechanisms, and the member from Wellington Halton Hills, my colleague, yesterday expanded very specifically on what some of those measures are. If the Prime Minister was truly earnest in wanting to do what's best for Canadians, Madam Speaker, he could release the names. There are a number of mechanisms to which he could do so, but he refuses. He would rather play politics, and he is playing with the security of Canadians and the interference of elections. Madam Speaker, that is shameful and puts our democracy at risk.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Surrey Newton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the foreign agents assassinated my constituent, Mr. Niger, and that falls in my constituency. That is not what I'm hearing on the ground. I'm hearing on the ground is that the leader of the Conservative Party is not accountable to Canadians because he's not taking the security clearance so as he can look at it how the Indian government has intervened into our sovereignty and has assassinated my constituent. In fact, the leader is standing with India, and he very well be able to know those 6 conservatives that we are talking about, who those members are, and he doesn't want.
What's up, Robert? How's it going? What's up, Sprock and 2 flips, 4 twists? What's up, everybody? How's it going today?
River Crowfoot.
Currently in the House of Commons proceedings. Started a little bit late today. I usually try to start around 1, but I was running a bit late.
For themselves.
Here we are.
But instead of doing what is in the best interests of national security, instead of doing what is in the best interests of democracy, the Prime Minister has decided that he will prioritize his own political self-interest. But specifically for that member who has highlighted a significant issue. I am curious as to what his constituents think about the Parliamentary Secretary denying the unanimous consent motion that was put forward on Monday about the standing up of a special committee to investigate the very issue that he claims is so important. Madam Speaker, it wasn't a Conservative that denied it. It wasn't a member of the Bloc. It wasn't a member of the NDP. It wasn't an independent. It was the Parliamentary Secretary, I believe, to the Prime Minister or to the House Leader. You'd have to forgive me. I don't recall. He's up so often. It's easy to forget. But what does that member? What is he hearing from constituents? The fact that one of the senior Liberals in his own party denied a unanimous consent motion to stand up a committee that would have gotten the answers that he has just communicated are so important. Madam Speaker, that's shame.
Sorry, the honourable member can continue through response to one more question. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I find it really interesting that the member opposite is talking about starting a committee, putting up another committee to look at an issue, when there is a suggestion that the papers he is wanting to have examined go to a committee, that we can move forward on this issue by actually following a committee that's already in place, as was suggested by the Speaker. And it seems that he's very free with suggesting that people's information, their names, their allegations against them, their personal information that might be in business documents, be released to whoever asks for them, Madam Speaker. Well, I realize it is our right and our privilege. We need to exercise that right with some discretion, and I would maintain that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms actually supersedes our right to do whatever we want in this House.
Honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot has 40 seconds to respond.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I would encourage that member to look very carefully at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and to look at some of the history, the hard-fought and won histories of Constitution, the constitutional setup of the Westminster system of governance. And now she doesn't like me referencing the history that has got us to the point where we are at here today. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest...
Members, they've had an opportunity to ask a question. They need to listen to the answer, whether they like it or not. And if they have other things to contribute, they should wait to the appropriate time. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot, if he could wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So what it comes down to, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is absolutely meant to protect Canadians from government, not to protect the government from the revelations of their corruption. So, Madam Speaker, if they are so concerned about privacy and whatnot, Madam Speaker, the solution is very, very simple. They release the documents so that the RCMP can do the work that they've been called to do. What are they working so hard to cover up, Madam Speaker? It's so simple. Why are they complicating the issue?
Resuming debate. Reprise de débat. The honourable member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to rise in this place, to promote democracy, to defend democracy, and to demand transparency and accountability from the government. But, Madam Speaker, before I begin, as a new member, I would like to thank my team in Toronto and in Ottawa who's helped me get up the learning curve to serve the great people of Toronto St. Paul's. Chelsea, Ryan, Jesse, Karen, and Brooke, thank you very much for your efforts. I have been stopped in the streets by strangers in St. Paul's that have thanked me for your good work and the work that you do for other constituents. We're now here on our 14th day of debate, a debate that did not need to happen. It would not have happened if we had a government that was interested in accountability and interested in transparency. Alas, we are here. If this government would hand over the documentation that Parliament has asked for and allow the RCMP to do their jobs, Parliament could move on. But that is not the case, and here we are. I may be new in this place, and I may have a babyish face, but I was not born yesterday. So the government's excuses for not providing the unredacted documents, which have changed several times since Parliament began asking for them, that makes me question the authenticity of those excuses. It was the protection of charter rights. Then it was the RCMP doesn't want them, and it feels like they keep flip-flopping to keep the documents hidden. Now, I have some particular interest in the Liberal Green Slush Fund scandal, and actually I think we all have a particular interest since it's already been established by the Auditor General that there was something awry going on with this fund. But we've already heard a lot about that, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But, Madam Speaker, one reason that the Green Slush Fund is interesting to me is that I used to work in the environmental field. Yes, that's true. In fact, I have a degree in civil environmental engineering from Queen's. Well, you know what? This is a big tent party, and
ask members who have anything to contribute to wait, because they will have 10 minutes of questions and comments. So lots of opportunity. I want to remind other members not to weigh in on this at all. And I would hope that the honourable member doesn't interact with others who are trying to make comments. So, order. Sorry, I still have members who are, for some reason, trying to have conversations. If they wish to do that, and the honourable member for Foothill may want to step out and have a conversation with the other member so that they're not interfering in the business of the House. The honourable member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I was about to say was that when I worked in that field following graduation, I was involved in environmental waste containment projects, exciting projects like building sewage lagoons, mine tailings dams, solid waste containment, and even wastewater retention ponds. Magical. Maybe that's not exciting to you, but it certainly was to our customers, the engineers, who are a difficult to excite crowd, and others who benefited. Yes, it's true. We all want clean water and clean air to breathe. You know, these were real products that we were selling. that were being sold and installed by real people onto real environmental projects. Materials were manufactured in Canada and sold throughout this country and in the United States. And you know what that means? That means GDP. GDP for Canada, exports, productivity. These products were considered new technology at the time. So while early adopters were happy to embrace and realize the environmental and economic benefits, others were not so sure. So where did we go? We went to the government for help. But this was not a Green Slush Fund. We had no contacts to get easy money. We did not have a slate of directors who were investors who had contacts or sat on the SDTC Slush Fund board. We applied to the government for research dollars and had testing carried out at our universities to prove the products. We conducted strength testing at the University of Western Ontario, as it was called then, and later at Queen's. So why do I tell you that story? Why could that possibly, my career, be germane to this House? Well, because as we've heard earlier, 82% of the projects that were sampled by the Auditor General were conflicted. If we apply that rate of malfeasance over the universe of projects, we come to a staggering $832 million of questionable funding. If we add the opportunity cost back to that $832 million, we're very close to $1 billion of taxpayer money funneled into sketchy destinations. But wait, there's more. $58 million was spent on 10 ineligible products or projects of the sample. That scales up to $104 million if we factor up to the full size of the universe of projects in question. How many projects, like the one I described above that I was involved in and undertaken by the small business that I worked for, were displaced because of the highly questionable awarding of funds by the board of the Green Slush Fund? Certainly there were good projects that did not get funding because the money was misallocated to ineligible projects. Some of these potential projects may well have been home runs. That's foregone GDP, that's foregone jobs, that's foregone tax revenue. Does this not suggest to everyone in this place that oversight of this fund was weak at best, and at the worst, there's potential criminality? Does this not make one think that we may need a change in the management of the government spending writ large? I see some heads nodding. That we may need some people with real financial expertise in charge of the books. This is green technology science, Madam Speaker. This is not rocket science. Getting to the bottom of this scandal may not be easy, but it's a journey worth taking. This is not $400 million that we're talking about. That's the number that's been confirmed. It only represents 226 projects of the 405 that were funded. So as I stated earlier, this is $832 million. I'll say it again for the people at home. $832 million plus opportunity cost. So we're very close to $1 billion scandal. $1 billion. That could buy a lot of Girl Guide cookies. One thing that's concerning for Canadians is the level of corruption in the board and the governor and council appointed to the Sustainable Development Technology Fund, otherwise known as the SDTC. People at home are calling it the Green Technology Slush Fund. Another is the federal government's refusal to produce key documents related to this matter, stifling public scrutiny and raising red flags about accountability. When government actions, particularly concerning the use of public funds, come under scrutiny, it's the right of every Canadian to demand clear answers. But we're not getting clear answers from this government, which leaves one asking, what are they hiding? Who are they protecting? Their friends and associates who benefited. The fact we are still discussing this and asking for a disclosure demanded by Parliament is bewildering to this rookie MP. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised when I consider the long list of Liberal scandals that are almost too many to count, but I'll name some here for good measure. We'll start with the SNC-Lavalin affair. This political scandal involved attempting political interference with the judicial system by the Prime Minister of Canada and the Prime Minister's office. Ultimately, the company changed their name, partly to distance themselves from their tarnished brand. Next we've got, and these are no particular order, just the ones that came off the top of my head, the ArriveCan affair, affectionately known as Arrive Scam. And this one, the federal government spent over $50 million on an $80,000 original contract. $54 million. A group of programmers, I'm not making this up, a group of programmers recreated the app over a weekend. So this one's out of control. So again, GDP is under attack. 10,000 people were erroneously forced to isolate. I might have been one of those because they made me isolate for longer than I needed to. The Agacon scandal. The Prime Minister was found to have broken no less than 4 provisions of the Conflict of Interest Act when he vacationed over Christmas on the posh private island in the Caribbean owned by his good friend, the Agacon. Trudeau was the first Prime Minister in Canadian history to break federal ethics rules. Ethics! Next, we have the We Charity scandal. And this one I particularly didn't like because my daughter actually participated in raising money for the We Charity. My daughter Charlotte raised over $10,000 to build a school in Africa by carrying water through the streets of Toronto, St. Paul's, and generating donations by doing just that. So this one hurt. But Prime Minister granted his friends at the We Charity a project to see over $1 billion program for student employment grants. Don't we have government employees that do the same thing? There are 2 common elements we can quickly identify through this partial list of government scandals. You can identify your own. These are the 2 that I pick. If you have a couple, if the members have a few in their head, just keep them quiet and see if they match up with mine. Madam Speaker, the first one is friends in high places of the Liberal government awarding their Liberal friends at the expense of taxpayers. And number 2 was a complete lack of ethical behavior. What we do not see is transparency. We do not see transparency. Transparency and accountability are the cornerstones of any functioning democracy. They are the twin principles that ensure those in power act in the best interests of the public rather than serving their narrow political or personal agendas. The concept of transparency isn't just theoretical. It's embedded in laws and regulations that compel governments to disclose information, especially when there are questions about the misuse of public funds. Parliament has this power. Parliament has asked for the documentation, and therefore the documentation must be produced. The government's accountability to its people is not optional. This is a fundamental responsibility. A 2024 CanTrust Index poll revealed that less than 25% of Canadians trust this Liberal Prime Minister and government. Is that a surprise to anyone? That number might be high since this poll was conducted back in February, but it makes sense. When the government refuses to release key documents, especially in response to serious allegations, it erodes public trust. It undermines the very fabric of our democracy. Without transparency, how can citizens know that their government is acting in good faith? Let's look at this from another angle. And I promise you again, I'm not making it up. I'm going to give you a bit of a timeline of how we got here. Madam Speaker, in 2018, the then Liberal Industry Minister decides he doesn't like the chair of the SDTC. That was Mr. Jim Balsillie, because he was criticizing the government. So he has the CEO of the SDTC ask the chair to stop his criticism. He doesn't. So in 2019, the Liberal Industry Minister decides to appoint a new chair, but this one already has conflicts of interest. But he did this even though the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office were warned of risks with appointing a conflicted chair. They were warned of risks associated with appointing a conflicted chair. That new chair had or has ownership positions in companies receiving Green Slush Fund, SDTC funding. So the funding floodgates open. Conflicts of interest are managed rather than outlawed. SDTC members begin to award funds to companies where other board members hold ownership. The following example is the one that I love the most. If you do something so audacious, maybe no one will suspect a thing. I think they call that hiding in plain sight. Cycle Capital. The founder and beneficial owner of Cycle Capital, Andre Lise Mitho, voted Cycle Capital Investments a significant amount of Green Slush Fund funding while she sat on the board of the Liberal Green Slush Fund. In fact, before and during her time on the Green Slush Fund board, her companies received $250 million. But wait, Cycle Capital's lobbyist, before he came to the House, was none other than a radical minister of the environment. Yep, so what? So what, you might ask? Well, in the year before he joined the Liberal government, he lobbied 25 times. And the Green Slush Fund board gave over $100 million to the Cycle Capital companies. But then, when part of the government, he participated in talks that gave the SDTC, the Sustainable Development Technology, another $750 million. $750 million. They gave $750 million to deploy, of which 25% of that went to guess who? Cycle Capital. And we don't know, but he may or may not still own shares in Cycle Cap. It's a really good trade where I come from. I spoke earlier about my career as an environmental engineer, but I spent actually most of my career in finance. That's another reason why the misappropriation of funds in this Green Slush Fund scandal speaks to me. When I was in the financial and investment industry, fund managers were generally paid dependent upon how their funds performed. The better your fund did, the more you're going to get paid. The better your fund did, the more assets you're going to attract, and again, the more you would expect to be paid, all else being equal.
Honestly, the longer this SDTC thing goes on, the less and less faith I have in the government as a whole. I already have no faith in the Liberal government, but Conservative, whatever at this point. They just keep playing fucking games. Jumping through hoops, running around in circles. It's like a dog chasing its tail at this point. Nothing is happening, and it was amusing for like 2 seconds.
Projects, the easiest thing to do, the path of least resistance.
Now, we're talking about over $400 million of taxpayer money just gone. Just poof, disappeared, to never be seen again.
We call that a fiduciary duty. Madam Speaker, for a government that loves to virtue signal about their care and vision for the environment, their behavior when it comes to deploying funds is contradictory, as I just detailed. They would say one thing and do another. And this matters, and here's why. Instead of investing taxpayer dollars in the most promising projects and companies, the Liberals appointed a chair, and her board funneled taxpayer dollars to projects and companies that were run by their friends or in companies where they had a financial interest. Can you imagine that? This is the kind of situation they teach you to avoid in a business education. This is why we have ethics classes in business and in financial education. Perhaps the financial leaders on the other side of the House missed those classes. Still, the misallocation of money and capital leads to the destruction of capital in this country. This leads to a loss of Canadian competitiveness, a reduction in productivity, and a decline in GDP. We're seeing all these economic measures play out now in our economy, and we're worse off as a country for it. The Green Slush Fund is not responsible for all of that, Madam Speaker, but the Green Slush Fund and its grant allocation principles are emblematic of the attitudes and principles of the Liberal government for the last 9 years. Good money put towards programs with admirable goals, yes, but lacking in the financial know-how and financial management expertise to succeed. That's taxpayer money wasted. The reduction of our productivity and competitiveness and GDP is not an accident. This is the result of an overall mismanagement of the economy by the Liberal Prime Minister and the Liberal Cabinet. At the heart of this issue, public trust. Canadians trust their government to act in their best interest and to steward public funds responsibly and to be forthright about how decisions are made. When this trust is broken, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild, except perhaps with a new government. The refusal to release the Green Slush Fund documents erodes this trust. It sends a message to the public that the government is not interested in being transparent and that accountability is a secondary concern. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I enjoyed that insightful speech by the member for St. Paul's. And I know, given his extensive business career and his knowledge and study of this subject, he would be aware that the chair of the fund, the Green Slush Fund, Annette Visharan, said when asked about all the money that went to their own companies, that this is what entrepreneurs do. Now, do you believe these 9 directors named as conflicts of interest by the Auditor General 186 times represent 82% of the green technology space? Was that coincidence? Do they represent it? Or did they get an oversized chunk of that money because of their insider status?
The honourable member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you for the question from my honourable colleague. The 186 companies would not represent 82% of the green technology space in Canada. We've got a very large green technology space in this country from coast to coast, and it would be much more than 186. So no, they did receive an outsized funding amount, 82% of that fund, to those 186 companies.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just a couple of questions. The member opposite and many members opposite have continually referred to the chair and board of FTTC as Liberal insiders. I'm just wondering if the member opposite knows anything about Annette Visharan, the chair, the past chair, and the fact that she had actually been advisor to Harper, to Flaherty, and to others in the Conservative Party, as well as being a major donor to the Conservative Party. And if that's not a friend to the Conservatives, then I'm wondering who he considers to be a friend to the Conservatives. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you for the question. The fact of the matter here is that the malfeasance in this fund started well after the Conservative Party left power. So whether or not the chair was friendly or not friendly at that time to the Harper government, Mr. Speaker, it's immaterial. What matters here is that there was money misappropriated, money misallocated, not to the strongest projects that were out there, and now we're trying to get to the bottom of it, but we're being stymied. Parliament is being stymied. We're not being stymied. We're being stymied as a group, as an institution, from getting to the bottom by the prevention of the release of this documentation.
The honourable member from Hamilton.
Oh, it's Big Bad Greg.
Hamilton
Here we
Centre
go.
Has a brief question for a brief answer.
Same question I've asked every Conservative in the House. Who stymies? Who's the stymier? Who are the stymiers in chief in this entire circus show that is this filibuster on a motion that they put forward and yet refuse to put forward? Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Toronto St. Paul.
Thank you for the question. It's an important question because here we are in Parliament asking for documentation, which is our privilege. It's not being produced. This could be over, as I've said before, in 35 seconds by producing the documentation. So, Mr. Speaker, that's all we need to happen here is for the will of Parliament to be honoured.
I hate to interrupt the questions and comments for the honourable member. The honourable member have 6 minutes and 12 seconds left for questions and comments when we resume debate on this motion at the next opportunity. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member from Ottawa West, Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is World Polio Day. Today we renew our collective resolve for a world where no child suffers from this paralyzing and deadly disease. Through efforts of organizations like Rotary International, we have successfully reduced polio cases by 99% since 1979, with 3 billion children vaccinated. Through efforts, pour garantir que nous réalisons l'objectif.
We will be able to eliminate polio, and we are committed to doing so. And to that end, Canada has committed $151 million to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative.
The tireless efforts of the health workers and the 20 million volunteers who have journeyed to the most remote corners of the world in 200 countries, delivering not just vaccines, but hope. Let the end of polio be not just a goal, but a legacy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Edmonton, Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, today is World Polio Day, a day to highlight global efforts to end polio. In 1996, Nelson Mandela said, quote, "Our aim is not merely to reduce the numbers afflicted, it is to eliminate the disease completely. No country can be safe from this disease until the whole world is rid of it." Today, we're so close to that goal, with Canada consistently playing a leading role. 3 Canadian Prime Ministers, including former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper, have been recipients of the Rotary Foundation's Polio Eradication Champion Award. And Canadian Jennifer Jones, who recently served as Rotary International's first female president, relentlessly continued Canada's leadership in this fight, working with dedicated partners like UNICEF, the Gates Foundation, Global Citizen, Results, and many others. Here in this House, members from all parties have time and time again united around efforts of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and the world is better for it. Now we need to finish the job.
Oh.
The honourable member for Alfred Penneau. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada asked the House of Commons to declare October 24, 2018 as the first Brain Cancer Awareness Day in Canada. That year also saw the launch of the first Toques for Hope campaign. Canadians were invited to show their support by sharing their toque photo on social media. Thanks to this campaign, the date became a symbol of solidarity in the face of this devastating disease. I'll be wearing mine when I leave this room today in memory of my mother and in support of the 27 people in Canada every day who are diagnosed with a brain tumor. And do you have your toque or sweater of hope? Thank you to the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada for its tireless work that makes a real difference. And thank you to everyone who will be wearing their toques today. The honourable member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. I rise in the House today to highlight the 40th annual Salon des Métiers d'Art de Boucherville, which is taking place November 1st to 3rd, 2024. Except for 2 years where it took a break during the pandemic, this event has happened every year since the first time in 1982, and it's a success. Every time, thousands of visitors come in and find unique and original products for their Christmas gifts or for themselves. This success is due in large part to the passionate, devoted president who has been at the head for 30 years, and I congratulate René Lavoie for that work. I also want to thank the contribution of the members of the committee who support that work: Céline Lozeau, Suzanne Heinzen, Isabelle Ross, and Nathalie Métivier. Thank you for promoting the talent of artists from Quebec. Thank you for giving them this chance to shine.
The honourable member from Labrador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate an extraordinary Labradorian, William Larkham Jr., for his incredible achievement on season 11 of the reality show Alone, aired on the History Channel. William hails from the tiny outport community of Williams Harbour, and his determination, resilience, and unmatched survival skills were on full display as he spent 84 grueling days north of the Arctic Circle near Nunavut in the Northwest Territories, enduring the harsh environment of the Arctic on the series Alone. He was one of 10 contestants, and he was the last one standing. His triumph earned him the grand prize of $500,000 US and a testament to his strength, knowledge of the land, and the spirit of survival. William's journey not only brought Labradorians to the edge of their seat, but it showcased his deep connection he has with land, water, and the remarkable skills passed down through generations of culture in the region. I congratulate William, and I ask all Labradorians, all parliamentarians, to join me in offering him our very best wishes.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through my many years of volunteering with Creating Alternatives and the Down Syndrome Foundation, I have witnessed firsthand the profound impact of inclusion and the importance of celebrating each individual's unique abilities. These experiences have deeply touched my heart and inspired me to put forward Motion 123, which calls on the government to recognize March 21st as the National Down Syndrome Day. So, by doing so, we will align with the United Nations, but also honor and celebrate the incredible contributions that individuals with Down syndrome make to our communities. Their love, positivity, and unwavering spirit enrich the lives of everyone around them. I am confident that my colleagues on both sides of the House will join me in supporting this motion. Together, we can affirm our commitment to recognizing and celebrating the abilities and contributions of all Canadians, regardless of the challenges they may face.
The
honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ensuring the vitality of Francophone communities outside Quebec is a priority for our government, and immigration can be a powerful tool to help us achieve that goal. Thanks to the 25 to 27 Immigration Levels Plan, the percentage of Francophone permanent residents amongst all permanent residents admitted to Canada outside Quebec will be 8.5% in 2025, 9.5% in 2026, and 10% in 2027. These targets demonstrate our commitment to ensuring growth of French-speaking communities and official language minority communities, and are in line with our Francophone immigration policy. I'm proud to be part of a government that promotes the ongoing vitality and prosperity of our communities. This is great news, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Markham Unionville.
Today, the Minister of Immigration tabled a 2025-2027 Immigration Levels Plan, a plan that will pause population growth in the short term to achieve well-managed, sustainable growth in the long term. Our government has been taking concrete action, including the recent reforms to the International Students Program, to ensure system integrity, and the results are showing. Many university and college cities are experiencing rental downturns, at least partially due to the cap on international students. In Vancouver and Toronto, rent went down 11% and 8.1% respectively. We are committed to achieving long-term goal and ensuring a well-managed, sustainable immigration system where everyone...
This is such a fucking lie. I used to know somebody who had come into the country a year ago. She was from Nigeria. She lives in a house with 7 other people, sharing a bedroom with a roommate, sharing a bed with a roommate. These people are actually fucking deranged when they think that the immigration process we have right now is good. Are you kidding me? There were townhouses. It was an entire townhouse district full of people who had just come into the country within a year or two. And each house probably had a minimum of 8 people living in it, sharing bedrooms. I can't believe the Liberals when they say shit like that.
And violence, and this escalation of hate and fear is just not the Canadian way. Enough is enough. When will this Prime Minister finally stand up for Jewish Canadians, take this disgusting rise in anti-Semitism seriously so that every Jew, no matter where they live, no matter where they work, and no matter where they go to school, can live safe and live free from hate?
Yeah.
The honourable member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills.
Mr. Speaker, I am astonished by the blatant disregard of the Leader of the Opposition has shown for the well-being of Canadians. His willful ignorance of critical security threats facing our nation is deeply concerning. Recently, RCMP's investigations have shown alarming evidence of agents from the Government of India engaging in serious criminal activity in Canada, including homicides, extortion, and threats to the South Asian community. Our citizens...
And whose fault is that, lady?
...imminent threat. Yet the Leader of the Opposition continues to peddle empty slogans...
Right, so let's blame Pierre for Trudeau's policies on immigration. Record high numbers of immigration. Let's blame the Conservatives for it, though, because, you know, they're the ones that are currently in power, right?
necessary security clearance and protect the integrity of not just the democratic process, but of his own party and all Canadians. Thank you.
This is why nobody trusts the Liberals. They're just a bunch of lying, two-faced snakes that say one thing, do another, push the blame onto people that aren't even in power.
Has torn a hole in yet another Canadian community. Hydromorphone seized by the Sarnia police has gone up by 170% in the first 8 months of this year, and a local addictions doctor has said diversion is to blame. The government talks about evidence, but when the evidence tells them something they don't want to hear, they just ignore it. Exactly. Every city touched by so-called safe supply has suffered. In Vancouver, 50% of all hydromorphone seizures were diverted from so-called safe supply. In London, the street price of hydromorphone dropped by 90%. In Port Coquitlam, children are accessing government-supplied opioids. This is homicidal humanitarianism. The evidence is right there, and the NDP Liberals do not care. Common sense Conservatives want Canadians suffering from addiction to survive and thrive, not suffer and die. We will restore their dignity and bring them home drug-free.
The honourable member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and their time is up. This NDP Liberal government is refusing to turn over documents to the RCMP showing that Liberal-appointed managers used the Green Slush Fund to pay nearly $400 million to companies that they themselves owned. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. In northern BC, residents are losing their logging, oil, gas, mining, and other natural resource jobs because this radical NDP Liberal Environment Minister. Meanwhile, the same radical NDP Liberal Environment Minister and Prime Minister take $400 million they take from you in carbon tax and pay off their NDP Liberal friends. Why won't NDP Liberals end the cover-up and give proof to police so Parliament can get back to work for Canadians?
Hear, hear.
The honourable member from Vancouver Granville.
Mr. Speaker, national security should be the responsibility and the priority of every single member of this House. We've seen over the last number of months and years the alarming rate with which foreign governments have sought to interfere with the democratic processes in this country and to damage our democracy. Every single one of us in this House bears a responsibility and obligation to ensure that we are well prepared and well informed in the face of these threats. Canadians know that our leaders having a security clearance is table stakes, but apparently not the Leader of the Opposition. He's hiding something. I know firsthand that top secret clearance process is detailed and precise, but it is something that gives our national security agencies absolute confidence in our integrity and our ability to be trusted with sensible and sensitive information. I simply cannot understand why the Leader of the Opposition refuses to get a security clearance. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, if he cares about this country and he cares about Canadians, he'll get the clearance, take the briefing, and protect the country. Why won't he?
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, at this very moment, there are thousands of workers rallying for respect and for their collective bargaining rights at the legislature in Alberta. Members of CUPE Local 3550 were stripped of their rights to strike by the Alberta government after they voted 97% in favour of job action. Education assistants, administrative staff, librarians, and student support staff are the backbone of our education system. They make our schools run, they support our teachers, and most importantly, they help our children. But they are not being treated with the respect they deserve. These workers, mostly women, 94% of Local 3550's members are women, work difficult, stressful jobs while making poverty wages. Now their most basic rights are being denied. Workers are tired of subsidizing funding cuts with poverty wages. Today and every day, I stand with the dedicated workers of CUPE 3550 and all the workers across Canada and Alberta.
Hear, 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 hear.
The honourable member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to mark the 50th anniversary of the founding of the École de Technologie Supérieure, which was founded in Montreal in 1974. Over the years, it has become a major success, graduating 25% of all of Quebec's engineers, ranking first in Quebec for the number of undergraduate engineering graduates. It's a member of the University of Quebec network, and today ETS has more than 11,000 students, 290 professors, and 77 research chairs, groups, and units. In short, it's a world-renowned incubator of grey matter. It ensures Quebec's prosperity by training our future engineers who will meet current and future technological challenges. It continues to grow, and the years to come promise to be even more successful for Quebec engineering. Imagine what's coming next. Long live the École de Technologie Supérieure, and happy 50th anniversary.
The honourable member from Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals, even Liberal MPs now acknowledge that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and now the chaos. Instead of trying to fix their mess of doubling housing costs or the record number of food bank visits, Liberal MPs are in full panic mode trying to save their own jobs. After 24 Liberal MPs told the Prime Minister yesterday that he's become so toxic that he needs to resign, the Immigration Minister called his own colleagues garbage. It got so bad during the caucus meeting, Liberals were fleeing the meeting to the bathroom to text journalists about how angry that they were. Yet the Prime Minister is completely out of touch and is still forging ahead with his plan to quadruple the carbon tax. But it is now clear, Mr. Speaker, everything in this country is broken because the Liberal Party is broken. But the solution is simple. If they can't get their act together, just call a carbon tax election, because Conservatives on this side are fired up and ready to go.
Let's have a public safety election. The honourable member from Pickering, Uxbridge.
Speaker, Canadians want to know why the Leader of the Opposition won't get his security clearance. Why doesn't he want to learn about ways that the governments like India work to disrupt our institutions? And it can't be those weak excuses that he will be muzzled, because every other leader in this House has received their clearance and has not been prevented from speaking on the matters that at hand, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has a choice. He can get the clearance, he can take the briefings, and he can protect the country. Or will he turn a blind eye to the actions of governments like India and who try to undermine our democracy? Will he stand up for Canadians, or will he stand with governments like India?
My God, your entire government undermines our democracy every day. Enough of this.
Canadians want to know.
Absolutely.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
Question period. Oh, it's sheer.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, it's clear he's not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, or chaos. The Liberal caucus is revolting, because even in once safe Liberal seats, voters are angry. They're angry that the Prime Minister raised their prices and devalued their paychecks with his inflation. They're angry that their grocery and home heating costs keep going up because of his carbon tax, and they're angry that their cars keep getting stolen, their parks are full of dirty needles, and homeless encampments now line their streets. So will the Prime Minister put an end to the anger, spread some much-needed joy, and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
So Pierre isn't here, and I mean, no shock, but Trudeau obviously isn't here.
The Canadians have had a tough couple of years as a result of the rising cost of living and global inflation, but Canadian households are right to ask who is actually fighting for them. I can tell you it's not Conservative caucus members who don't want to forgive interest on student loans. It's not the Conservative leader who wants to take away the Canada Child Benefit.
It's Randy.
If you don't believe me, look at his voting record. It's not the Conservative caucus members who want to make sure that Canadian women don't have access to free birth control. Mr. Speaker, in the next election, people are going to ask themselves, do they want a Liberal government who cares about them or a Conservative leader who cares about himself?
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
It has been a tough couple of years, Mr. Speaker. It's been a tough 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And now taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. It's not just Conservatives saying that, it's Liberal MPs too. You see, they can't do it anymore. They can't convince voters that taxes are going down when in fact they're going up. They can't convince their voters that home prices are becoming more affordable when they keep getting more expensive. And they can't convince their voters that crime is down when it just keeps getting worse. So now they're trying to convince the Prime Minister to resign. But since he won't, will he do the next best thing and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share some facts, if I might. I stand here as the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth, and I wonder if this ministry will even exist if Conservatives were to gain power. Here are the facts. Conservatives will cut services to survivors of gender-based violence. They'll cut critical supports for women entrepreneurs. They'll cut life-saving support for grassroots organizations. They will cut pharmacare and contraceptives for women. We on this side of the House stand for women and gender-diverse people. They do not. Straight facts, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
That is baseless and false. We're going to cut the carbon tax, eliminate it, and defund the CBC and put that savings back in taxpayers' pockets. But consider where we are. It's actually kind of amazing. Liberal MPs are so frustrated that they're not allowed to speak in caucus, they're actually confiding in Conservatives. They have to sneak out to the bathroom to have therapy text sessions with journalists, and cabinet ministers call their own colleagues garbage because they're speaking out against the Prime Minister's terrible record. He's losing control, he's losing confidence, he lost the plot a long time ago, so for the love of all that's holy, will he finally call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for...
Leader of the opposition, the leader of the Conservatives would do if he was the Prime Minister, he would cut things like the Canada Summer Jobs Program, Mr. Speaker, something that exists in every one of our communities that is so important to employers and so important to kids. Mr. Speaker, do you think that we would be able to maintain our progress on clean water? He would cut funding to First Nations dependent on a real and fair, equitable solution.
Perhaps we'll take just a quick second so that people can reflect on the fact that you must not take the floor if you have not been recognized by the Speaker.
That you should not be speaking unless you're recognized by the Speaker.
Oh, Greg.
The Honourable Member from Mégantic-Clérable. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, why the Prime Minister was all smiles yesterday when he left his chaotic caucus where 24 MPs called for his departure? It's simple, because the Prime Minister knows he can count on the support of the 32 Bloc Québécois MPs down there to keep him in office. The Bloc supported this Prime Minister despite the fact that he doubled the cost of housing, he inflated the cost of food, he caused a rise in violent crime and created the worst immigration crisis in Canadian history. Will the Prime Minister take a look behind him, hear the message from his backbenchers and Quebecers, and call an election now? The Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listen. The sheer hypocrisy of the Conservative Party is eminently clear. Let us not forget that the leader of the Conservative government at the time removed benefits for diabetics. Since then, they've voted against free pharmacare for people living with diabetes. We see the Conservatives are all about doublespeak. That's all they're about. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, the Minister should perhaps go round her caucus and notice that 24 of her MPs have come out to demand the Prime Minister's departure just this week. A Prime Minister that's doubled national debt, mortgage prices that has allowed criminality to explode. The Prime Minister's incompetence, Mr. Speaker, has led to an alarm bell being rang in amongst his own partisans who are calling for a change of leadership. He even sent one of his ministers to say that opponents within his party, his own MPs, are garbage. The Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost, nor the insults. When is he going to drop the writ? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us talk about housing and incompetence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr. Speaker. 6 affordable housing units. That's all the Conservative leader was able to do when he was housing minister throughout the country. He can't even find where these 6 are. He's trying to figure out where he can go to find them. Did someone perhaps build something that he could appropriate? No. Only 6 housing units. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member from La Prairie. For years, the Bloc Québécois has been alone in Ottawa in pointing out that the federal government's immigration targets are leading us straight into a wall. For years, the government has been lecturing us, saying that there is no such thing as an intake capacity limit, lecturing us that to talk about reception capacity is to directly criticise immigrants, lecturing us that Quebec doesn't lack the capacity to welcome immigrants, it lacks the will. And then finally today, the federal government has decided to do a 180 and lower its immigration thresholds. Why did they wait until the whole of Canada was in crisis before finally listening to Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have moved today is a reasonable immigration plan by reducing permanent residency targets and temporary residency targets. This is a reasonable and reasoned plan that comes from contributions from people coast to coast to coast that asked us to reduce our volumes. I think that Canadians should be proud. It's not a radical reduction. It's about the same as the plan we proposed in 2020, but I think that's going to serve Canadians in Quebec as well. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, not only has the federal government finally agreed with us on intake capacity, it has also recognised the Bloc Québécois' call for successful immigration. I quote from their report on immigration. For immigration to succeed, housing, education, healthcare, childcare and other essential services must keep pace with projected population growth. Well, gosh, Mr. Speaker, they've figured it out. Quebecers have been telling them for years, but it wasn't until Canadians told them that they would finally listen. Why didn't they listen to Quebecers before instead of lecturing us throughout the years? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. I'd like to thank to the Bloc's contributions to national unity.
God, our government is pathetic. It just exposes itself further and further. Just being useless.
Abortion is health care, but under this Liberal government, so many Canadians still don't have access to reproductive health care. And for those who live outside of larger urban centres, it's almost impossible. You know, the anti-choice Conservatives would only make this worse. The Trump-light leader and his extremist...
Oh my God, here we go again, bringing up American politics in Canada. Tell me you're deranged without telling me you're deranged.
The Canadians get the care that they deserve. Why hasn't the government taken access to reproductive health care seriously?
Like, Trump just lives rent-free in these people's minds, and he's not even running in this country.
The member for her advocacy, but the right to an abortion and access to it go hand in hand. And through a $45 million sexual and reproductive health fund, we're addressing that. We're making sure, Mr. Speaker, that Canadians facing obstacles accessing reproductive health care are supported financially, and organizations providing those essential services have capacity funding. While Conservatives MPs try to limit a woman's right to choose, we'll continue to work hard at opening every possible door, Mr. Speaker, to increasing access.
The honourable member from London Fanshawe.
Canadians have heard that Liberal rhetoric before, but the point here is that abortion care and access to it isn't good enough. Women and gender-diverse Canadians are scared. They know that their rights are under attack, and they've seen far-right movements and politicians in Canada emboldened. The Conservatives continue to side with anti-choice movements and believe that Canada is a, quote, lawless state of fetal killing. But we know abortion is health care. Will this Liberal government use the Canada Health Act to make sure that all Canadians have full access to abortion?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, and I completely agree. Abortion is health care. It's absolutely essential that every woman in every part of this country has access not only to abortion, but to the reproductive tools that she needs to have control and autonomy over her own body. And we are making remarkable progress on that. Signing agreements with every province and every territory, having indicators common on health standards across the country, making sure that for the first time every woman everywhere has access to the contraceptives that she needs. That's what freedom looks like. That's what we're delivering.
So was that freedom about 4 years ago when you were forcing people to do a certain something over a certain thing that happened that may or may not have shut down the country?
Even excuses are up. The Prime Minister now admits he destroyed Canada's immigration system and the 150-year immigration consensus. He can't fix what he broke. He can't fix immigration. He can't fix housing or anything else right now because he's fighting his own caucus. So instead of blaming everyone else, including immigrants like myself, will he just admit that he shattered the immigration system and caused lasting damage to Canada's housing market, healthcare, and jobs?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Monsieur le Président. Look, I was...
Mr. Speaker, I'm just gonna smile at you and make a weird face and then ramble on about some bullshit.
He's late to the game. He's so late to the game on this, he hasn't even come up with a slogan yet, so...
Was I wrong? Here he is, talking about slogans. Not addressing the issues.
Take the chance to respond, but what we've proposed is a plan for controlled migration. We're proud of it. It serves Canadians well.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Speaker. It's rich coming from that particular minister who called 24 Liberal MPs garbage because they're looking after their own careers and worried they're not going to make it. They're not going to be here after the next election because their own constituents are going to send them to the unemployment line. Now, this Prime Minister is reckless, and he even said it himself. He didn't get it right. He said it during his own press conference. He didn't get it right on immigration. He didn't get it right on housing. He can't get it right on the carbon tax. So, will the Prime Minister just admit that his flip-flop has destroyed the immigration system and accept his own personal failure?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
What I said, Mr. Speaker, is that it's garbage to focus on anything other than the circus clown that he's supporting.
Once again, not addressing the actual issues, just here we go. Oh, Greg's gonna give the smackdown.
I'm gonna Honourable Minister to please withdraw that comment that was unparliamentary towards another member of Parliament.
Oh, he's actually gonna say something.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the comment.
Oh, thank you. The Honourable Member
Guy
from
thinks
Oxford.
he's a fucking comedian.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and chaos in our immigration system is also up. The Liberal NDP government has broken our world-class immigration system with their reckless policies. And today's immigration flip-flop is a massive admission of their own failures. The Prime Minister said that he didn't get the balance quite right.
That's an understatement.
That is clearly obvious with the state of our country today. So will the Prime Minister admit that he broke Canada's consensus on immigration and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
I'll have to put forward a plan instead of slogans. I haven't even heard the slogan on this because he's been so delinquent on coming up with any valid points to be made on the immigration system, the consensus of which is challenged. Let's hear him. Let's hear his plan. Let's even start hearing the slogan because we haven't heard it yet.
The Honourable Member from Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, they're trying to be firefighters when they're the ones that are causing the fires in the first place.
That's right.
We had a consensus on immigration in this country, and this incompetent Prime Minister broke it. Right. They ignored warnings from their own officials. They dropped police clearance certificates from their own background checks for temporary residents. They even told their own officials to skip vetting for temporary foreign workers. Wow. So there is no doubt that after 9 years, they have broken the consensus on immigration. Will they call a carbon tax election now so common sense Conservatives could clean up their mess?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, if the member opposite thinks that security certificates from the Modi government are reliable, he needs a little clearance too on top of his leader, who should probably get a better briefing on the national security of this country. Get the clearance, get the briefing, stop being a baby, and be responsible.
Order. Order.
Oh my God.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, there's chaos in immigration. Like in the Liberal caucus, this government broke the immigration system with the help of the Bloc that voted to keep the government in power. Let us remember that this coalition left Roxham Road open 1 year after the United States moved to close it. To govern well is to forecast well. Our government will bring back coherence, planification, and a common-sense Prime Minister. We want elections right now, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister for Citizenship, Immigration and Refugees. Mr. Speaker, it's been full incoherence from the Leader of the Opposition, in fact. I would like to hear what the member has to say on her Francophone strategy outside of Quebec, because finally we've reached our target of 6% of Francophone permanent residents outside of Quebec will hit 10%. It'll be the first time in our history. They should be proud of it. They should support us on this matter. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. I would like to remind everyone, everything has been broken by this government, and the Bloc Québécois voted almost 200 times to keep the government in power. Today, we've seen a desperate attempt from the Prime Minister to repair what he broke himself. Full confusion in the changes made to immigration, full incoherence and full improv from the Liberal government. Only a Conservative government could repair the immigration system and will repair the immigration system. Our message is clear. We want elections, and we want them now. The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. The Honourable Member decided to read off her page instead of answering my question. I want to hear what the Conservative parties are planning, because they're not even mature enough. They haven't even thought an iota about the slogan on this matter. I would like to hear their plan. Our plan is reasonable and will control immigration in a reasonable way for Canada and Quebec for the next 3 years. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. The Liberals have finally started to listen to the message from Quebecers put forward by the Bloc Québécois. Instead of raising their immigration targets to 500,000 a year, they are going to lower them to 365,000 by 2027. If Quebec wanted to follow the federal government's new target, it would still have to take in more than 80,000 immigrants per year. That's higher than Quebec's target, and no political party in Quebec is proposing more than 80,000 a year. So how did the federal government figure out that Quebec's capacity to accept immigrants is greater than the evaluation and reckoning of all the parties in Quebec City? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows full well that Quebec Quebec's government has approved an agreement with us. They have jurisdiction over their numbers. We're waiting to hear from their plan. We've proposed a plan on a Canadian scale. We're waiting to hear what they have to say, and they will be able to do what they do under the current agreement. We give them $6 billion for francization and immigration, and we will continue to work with them. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. On that subject, the proposed new thresholds are a step forward, yes, but they still force Quebec to choose between accepting a greater number of immigrants or losing political weight in Canada. That said, Quebec's main concern is still temporary immigration, especially asylum seekers. There is still no plan whatsoever for spreading asylum seekers in amongst the provinces, and Quebec continues to be responsible for almost half of all asylum seekers in Canada. Mr. Speaker, it is the federal government's responsibility to convince reluctant provinces to do their part. So, what are they waiting for? The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. It's wrong that Quebec welcomes 50% of asylum seekers. He just has to consult the statistics that we provide. Statistics Canada states that there have been decreases of asylum seekers at Trudeau Airport in Montreal. It's now at 29%. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. While there is still no fair distribution of migrants between provinces, there is a real risk that migration will skyrocket after the US elections in just 12 days' time. Presidential candidate Trump, should he win, is proposing to deport 11 million people. So if he wins, organizations in Quebec have told us that they expect many people to conclude that they should just pack up and head to Canada.
And what, just come directly here?
We ended up with Roxham Road.
My God, no. Trump is going to deport illegal migrants, people who are going into the country illegally, and he's going to send them back to where they came from. He's not going to send 11 million people directly into Canada. Holy fuck, is the bloc retarded?
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
The former immigration minister and the MP from Central Nova oversaw population growth in this country of 200% over the past several years. He lost track of the people that he let in. Worse, he saw international students living in homeless shelters or with 14 roommates in a basement, all while he ignored his department's advice on it was too much and too fast. Watching the impact of these failed policies on housing, the Prime Minister said, "That's my guy for housing." Why did the Prime Minister promote this guy instead of firing him?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Speaker, the opposition would like to distract from the issues that actually matter most to Canadians. They focus these days on caucus unity. I would actually point out she sits just a few seats down from a colleague who just a few years ago she criticized for casting aspersions on the LGBTQ2+ community. When it comes to the work that we're actually doing to get the homes built, we are doing everything we can to build more affordable housing. When their leader was actually in the position of housing minister.
So what does the alphabet mafia have to do with building houses?
We're going to focus on what matters to Canadians, not the distractions that they try to put on the floor of the House of Commons.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
195,000 was the number, and that's a number that minister would only dream of building because some people fail upwards. Even Canada's current...
Take it easy, Sprock. Thanks for stopping by.
Really a system that has gotten out of control. He was talking about the same immigration system controlled by the new housing guy who lost track of the people who he let in and is now laughably in charge of fueling the housing crisis that the Prime Minister created. The Prime Minister can't possibly fix housing or immigration or anything else because he's fighting his own caucus. So if the Prime Minister won't fire this guy, will he resign in disgrace?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my feelings. Look, they're going to be disappointed to know that I spend no time or energy thinking about the insults they hurl at me. What concerns me is the
But yet, whenever an insult is hurled, you are quick to bring it up. Your entire party is quick to run to the speaker to make sure you get an apology. Whenever an insult is thrown, you're quick to make it a point of order. What are we doing here?
Here's the kicker, and I've got news. That number, if we accept it as the right metric, is the worst record of any housing minister in the last 10 years. If they want a prize for their leader's efforts, it's the prize for biggest loser.
Yeah, but and then he throws an insult. I muted it there, but he just complained about insults and then threw an insult. God, they're fucking losers.
The honourable
They
member
really
from
are.
Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is
Unreal.
up, time is up. The former Minister of Immigration and MP for Central Nova was responsible for population growth of 200% in the past several years. Worse, he saw international students living in homeless shelters and in cramped quarters while ignoring departmental warnings that immigration levels were rising too fast. Now, watching the impact of these failed policies on housing, the Prime Minister sat back and proudly said, "That's my guy, that's my housing minister." Why did the Prime Minister promote this minister? Instead of simply firing him, are the two of them waiting to get a pink slip from the Liberal caucus?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I don't know what that was about,
Mr.
but
Speaker, they want to talk about immigration as failure. I'm surprised that they would call it a failure, that we provided
It is a
refuge
failure.
to hundreds of thousands of vulnerable Ukrainians who fled a war of aggression. I'm surprised that they think it's a failure to have made good on our commitment to welcome 40,000 Afghan refugees, including
It is a
those
failure because we have nowhere to house them, and we have people living here right now that can't afford housing or don't have a house, or like I said before, have been in the country for a year and are sharing a house with 7 other individuals because they can't afford it. Whatever the case is, it's an absolute failure. And to sit here and say it's a strength in Canada to have record high immigration and nowhere to put people, it's just deranged. Record high food prices, people can't afford anything. Let's just keep bringing people in. Sounds like a good idea.
Port Moody, Coquitlam.
10 million Canadians won't have a family doctor by the end of the decade. With an aging population, this is unacceptable. The Liberals have been dragging their feet for years on health care, while the Conservatives' answer is to make people pay for that care. Despite the Liberals' announcements, the pan-Canadian licensure for doctors is still not a reality, which would get more people connected with a doctor. Why are the Liberals dragging their feet on this simple health solution?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would say to the honourable member that was an absolutely critical point of conversation at the last health ministers meeting, where we've committed to doing that. In fact, you take a look at what was done in the Atlantic provinces. We're moving forward with exactly that. And the agreements that we've signed with every province, every territory, $200 billion. Just today, we got baseline data that shows on surgical wait times and on making sure that the number of surgeries are provided, that we're back ahead of where we were prior to the pandemic. That on doctors and nurses, there are more doctors and nurses in virtually every province and every territory. We're making...
So then why were the doctors and nurses complaining that there was a staff shortage a few years ago?
Canadians are worried about massive flooding and wildfires. Conservatives are rubbing elbows with the same CEOs who are fueling the climate crisis. The Conservative leader spent a night schmoozing with these executives at his $1,600 a plate fundraiser. He's not listening to hardworking Canadians. But the Liberals are no better. They met with oil and gas lobbyists 5 times a day. Shameful. Canadians should come first, not CEOs. So why are the Liberals ripping a page from the Conservative playbook and putting CEOs ahead of people?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as
It's like the NDP just found out that the Liberals have been putting themselves ahead of the people.
of organized fundraisers for me, but I would like to quote her colleague from her own party, Madam Speaker, the member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie, who said, as a New Democrat, as a progressive, as an environmentalist, we're in favor of putting a price on pollution, Mr. Speaker. Well, it would look like that under pressure from the Conservative, the NDP are no longer conservative, no longer progressive, no longer environmentalist, Mr. Speaker.
What?
The Honourable Member from Scarborough Centre.
What the hell is that word salad?
Today is a big day. The Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship just tabled the immigration levels plan for 2025-2027. This is a comprehensive plan that will align the number of newcomers to the supports available in the country, as immigration is essential to Canada from an economic, social and cultural perspective. A well-managed, robust immigration system is vital. Could the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship provide an update on our government's efforts towards ensuring a sustainable immigration system where everyone has a fair chance to succeed?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to personally thank the member for her contribution on this matter. She knows well as on this side of the House how important immigration is to this country, its past and its future. We need a manageable system that is controllable. This is what we are doing today with the Levels Plan. The reductions that we have proposed alleviate the impacts on infrastructure and housing. It's something that Canadians can be immensely proud of, and we should be very proud of the immigrants that continue to build this country and make it better than what it is today.
Yeah. The Honourable Member from Kildonan St. Paul.
Is it better than
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, violent crime is up and police have had enough, Mr. Speaker. Frontline officers in Toronto, York, Vancouver, Surrey are all slamming the Prime Minister for his self-congratulatory social media campaign where he promoted his failed handgun policy that has done nothing to stop violent gun crime, which is up, in fact, by 116% since the Liberals took power 9 years ago. When is the Prime Minister going to stop patting himself on the back for his failures and start listening to police?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, one important difference between our government and the Conservative Party is we don't believe assault-style military firearms have their place on Canadian streets.
Oh boy, here we go.
Firearms, Mr.
You put a tactical rail on your AR and it's all of a sudden an assault-style fucking this, that, and the fourth.
So we can remove them from the streets. That's something that police officers in my conversations have been very supportive of, and they're very worried, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservative Party have plans to, in fact, evacuate all those important measures. That's not in the interest of public safety.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Kildonan St. Paul.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to let the police association speak for themselves. To that Liberal minister and to this Liberal Prime Minister, from Surrey, BC, quote, the federal handgun freeze fails to address the real issue, which is the surge of illegal firearms coming across our border, ending up in the hands of violent criminals. From Vancouver, BC, quote, stopping legal sales won't stop criminals from getting guns illegally. You're only restricting law-abiding citizens while doing little to address actual gun violence. When is the Prime Minister going to stop working against police, stop going after law-abiding citizens, and start going after the real problem, criminals?
I covered this yesterday. The Toronto police literally exposed Trudeau. They did a very good job.
Mr. Speaker, I was surprised that our colleague raised the issue of border security. Our government, unlike the Conservative government previously, has invested precisely so the Canadian Border Services Agency would be able to interdict these illegal firearms crossing our borders. Mr. Speaker, we work with the RCMP, their policing partners, and border services. The Conservatives cut the funding to these agencies, laid off hundreds of border services agents, and had in fact plans to cut another 800. The good news, Mr. Speaker, is they lost the 2015 election. We reinvested in those important priorities for Canadians and will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, crime is up because the Prime Minister's policies are failing. The Toronto Police Association says that violent crime is up 78% since these Liberals came into power. Shootings are up 45% since last year. Gun-related homicides up 62% since last year. So when will the Prime Minister start listening to police associations across Canada and admit he's adding to the crime wave, not fighting it?
That's right.
Hey! Very nice. Very good.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Procurator General.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that member's contributions to the House. I just don't appreciate the hypocrisy. What I would say is that assault-style rifles aren't used for hunting deers. That's why we're taking them out of circulation.
Are you kidding me? AR-15s aren't used for hunting deers, one of the most accessible, mass-produced weapons out there with the cheapest ammo you can buy on the market because it is so mass-produced? Tell me you know absolutely nothing without saying you know absolutely nothing. You fucking moron. Unreal. Unreal.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Minister of Justice continues to reveal just how out of touch this government is. And we have real-time evidence
Insanely out of touch.
Just less than 3 hours ago, there was a shooting in Toronto near Shepherd and Yonge, not far actually from the Minister of Justice's riding. And in that situation, a person is now lying in the hospital in life-threatening condition. So when will this government actually take responsibility for the crime that it's causing and listen to the police?
That's right. Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
I can assure that member that I listen to the police all of the time. And you know what they
Oh,
tell me?
clearly
They
you
tell me
don't.
that when you take guns out of circulation, what you do is you help on things like gender-based violence and domestic violence that occurs because women are getting killed because guns are in the homes. When you pass a bill like C-21, you disable that from happening because you ensure that you're keeping women in this country safe. That is a priority, or should be a priority, for this entire parliament. It's just really shocking that that member doesn't get it.
This guy's a fucking joke.
The honourable member for Drummond.
He is actually pathetic. It is unreal. Yeah, I actually listen to our police all the time. Oh, you do, huh? You do. Okay.
Yesterday, in response to a question posed by the leader of the Bloc Québécois, the Prime Minister stated that what happened at Bedford School was just a matter of teachers' freedom of expression. I'm sorry, but imposing religious values in your classroom is not a matter of freedom of expression. This is exactly why we need secularism, which allows everybody to believe or not believe whatever they want. They only have to consult their own conscience freely. Do these liberals realize that they are attacking Quebecers' freedom of conscience? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, but what he just said is revolting. The Prime Minister never said that. On several occasions, the Prime Minister has said that it is unacceptable that children in Quebec be treated in this manner. And he also said that it is up to the government of Quebec to take care of this issue. The Honourable Member for Drummond. We tried to talk to this Prime Minister about religious intolerance, and he has nothing more to say than that liberals will always defend freedom of expression. Well, first of all, let me just say that religion is not necessarily a shining example of freedom of expression. But when there's an adult forcing their religious convictions on their classroom, that is not a matter of freedom. Religion belongs in the private sphere. We need to protect the separation of church and state, and yet the liberals will be challenging that in the courts. Will this liberal government finally commit to not challenging Bill 21, directly or indirectly? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Once again, I am very disappointed by the doubtful arguments made by my colleague. First of all, I want to remind everyone, including those listening at home, is that respecting children's safety and dignity is everyone's responsibility. But when it comes to education jurisdiction, that's up to the government of Quebec.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. And violent gun crime is up 116% in Canada in just 9 years. Now, following the Prime Minister's out-of-touch comments, the Vancouver Police Association stated the Prime Minister is, quote, not aware of the ongoing gang war here in BC, which is putting both our members and public at risk on a daily basis. Right. Will the NDP Liberals listen to police and finally admit that their soft on crime policies are
He's gonna come back saying, yeah, I listen to the police all the time.
The Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, one thing that's definitely up are slogans in this House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, we have said clearly that we will support law enforcement both at the RCMP and in terms of their partners in policing, including police in British Columbia, municipal police in British Columbia. That's why we renewed the Guns and Gangs program, Mr. Speaker, that precisely puts money in the hands of these brave women and men who serve in municipal and provincial police forces so they can do the exact work that my colleague pretends she wants them to be able to do.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's the police themselves that are saying that the policies of this Liberal government are a failure. And Conservatives are listening to police who know the facts about gun violence, public safety, and the real impact in our communities. Now, following the Prime Minister's out-of-touch comments, the Surrey Police Union stated, quote, the federal handgun freeze fails to address the real issue, the surge of illegal firearms coming across our borders and ending up in the hands of violent criminals, unquote. 85% of seized firearms are traced back to the United States. So why doesn't the Prime Minister listen to our law enforcement by starting to crack down on smuggled guns from the U.S.?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government did precisely that. It listened to law enforcement professionals who asked us to reverse the cuts of the previous Harper government to the women and men who serve in our Border Services Agency and who...
Oh my god, this is the same government that was calling to defund the police a few years ago because of a certain incident in the States. You can't believe a single thing they say when it comes to the police. You really can't. They haven't been there for them all along. And when the stations, the associations themselves are coming out saying, your policies are bending us over more than they are helping us, then maybe you should change your policies.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. The Prime Minister wants to pat himself on the back, but the data in the Toronto Police Association say he's out of touch. Last year in Toronto, we saw a 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides. In St. Paul's, 2 people were murdered in Oakwood. A police officer was shot in Yonge and Eglinton, and armed home invasions happen every day. The Liberals make life easy for career criminals with their catch and release bail policies. When will this government finally come up with a plan to stop the crime and bring home safe streets?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, if that member expects us to apologize for taking assault-style weapons off of the streets, he's not going to get that. If that member thinks we're going to apologize for keeping women safe from domestic violence by implementing a handgun freeze, he's not going to get that apology. If that member thinks we're not going to take seriously the mental health impacts of suicides that are related to guns...
Oh yeah, seems like they're doing a real good job at stopping any sort of crime. This is the Liberal government right here, guys. Right here. Police officer seriously injured. 3 arrested after Toronto police officer gets shot. These are different occasions.
Party's tradition of inaction and negligence by refusing to get a security clearance. He chooses to play instead of working for Canadians to combat foreign interference. That's not common sense, Mr. Speaker. That's nonsense. Can the Minister of Justice and Attorney General tell Canadians how our government has taken historic action on foreign interference?
The Honourable Minister. Oh, one moment, please. The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
I thank the member from Lac St. Louis for that important question. The Conservative leader continues to ignore national security. Instead of protecting Canadians, he prioritizes his partisan interests. This is not serious leadership, Mr. Speaker. I'll explain it in 3-word slogans just so that the Conservative leader gets it. It's time to get the clearance, take the briefing, protect the country. It's that simple.
And he thinks he's funny.
Order, please. À l'ordre. The Honourable Member from Brantford Brent.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and now corruption is up. GC Strategies, a 2-person company working from their basement, started scooping up government contracts like candy just weeks after the Prime Minister took office. $20 million for doing nothing on the failed arrive scam, $100 million in total in government contracts. If that doesn't scream corruption, I don't know what does. Will the Liberals get our money back?
No, the money is gone. I think we need to accept this. It's long gone.
And for public services.
Oh, Greg, are you okay? Jesus.
I'm happy to repeat this in French because this is something that my colleague
Nobody
has
wants to
already
hear
heard
it.
several times in English. It's very good that the Auditor General and the RCMP are independent and that both of these organizations are doing the work that they are supposed to do, and we will support them.
The exact same RCMP that you continue to hire into your own investigations? Okay.
Liberal corruption is on rinse and repeat. The Auditor General is investigating $100 million in contracts awarded to GC Strategies, a 2-person IT company that did no IT.
Colleagues.
Order.
Yeah, exactly. The exact same RCMP that, yeah, exactly.
Colleagues. Order, please.
Colleagues.
Colleagues.
Sit
it's very
down.
important for us to. I'm going to ask the honourable member to start his question again from the top, but I'll ask the member, please sit down for a second.
Oh my God, our parliament is a joke.
Order, please. Order. I'm going to ask the honourable member to start again, but it's a very important fact. It's a basic fact here that questions can be asked in English or in French, and questions can be answered in English or in French.
Did somebody say something in a different language? And we wonder why we have foreign interference.
Corruption is on rinse and repeat. The Auditor General is investigating $100 million in contracts awarded to GC Strategies, a two-person IT company that did no IT work on the failed Arise scam app. The RCMP has already raided the home of GC Strategies founder Christian Firth as part of an ongoing criminal investigation. Will the Liberals cut the corruption and again get the taxpayer its money back?
Honorable Ministre des Services Publics et de l'Approvisionnement.
Mr. Speaker, what we just heard is an insult to all Francophone members in this House, including Conservative members. Is the member trying to tell me that I don't have a right to speak French in this House?
If you want my honest opinion, I think our country would be better off without it, but hey, fuck, who am I to say?
Alors, s'il vous plaît. Order. Order. The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Ooh. Ooh.
And the honourable member from Alfred Pellat.
Oh! It's a Thursday. Why is everybody going crazy today? Yesterday should have been the crazy day.
L'honorable député de Lévis.
Or at least Monday.
Lotbinière.
Come on.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Liberals are continuing to obstruct justice by refusing to produce unredacted documents. Meanwhile, the Liberals were caught red-handed giving a $20 million contract for the development of ArriveCan to the company GC Strategies, which only has 2 employees. That's a pretty darn high hourly rate, at a time when 2 million Canadians are lining up at food banks. Meanwhile, how many Liberal buddies have filled their pockets at the expense of Canadian families?
Le ministre des Services Publics et de l'Approvisionnement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to congratulate my colleague for asking his question in French, but he could have asked the question in English, because in this House, we are free to speak whichever official language we wish. And I'd like to invite his previous colleague to apologize for having asked me to answer his question in English.
Yeah, and it's not like we are an entire country based off of speaking that language either. It's one province in our country that has dictated everybody to learning this language. Now, like, I don't have a problem if you want to learn French, if you want to learn Spanish, you want to learn fucking Russian, German, I don't give a shit. But we should be speaking English. When in the House of Commons, when people speak French and they need to have a translator speak over in English, why aren't we just doing it in English to begin with?
Speaker, foreign interference is an issue that's detrimental to our national security and to the safety of Canadians. We now know that agents of the Government of India have targeted Sikh and South Asian Canadians. National security experts, including 2 former directors of CSIS, have emphasized how important it is for all party leaders to get the security clearance to view and act on intelligence. Can the government House leader explain how crucial it is for party leaders to get the clearance to protect Canada's democratic institutions?
The honourable member from Niagara Falls, I'm going to ask him please to not take the floor unless he is being recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from
Your
Halifax
cauliflower?
West for that important question. It's a question that's on the mind of many Canadians, is why won't the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada get his security clearance, Mr. Speaker? It's interesting to note that his Conservative members of Parliament would rather put our national security, our allies, our intelligence, allyships, and quite frankly, the lives
You want to talk about allies now?
rather than have their leader get his security clearance. The question is why? What is he hiding and what is he trying to protect? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You want to talk about allies when you've just kicked out a bunch of Indian diplomats from our country due to a foreign interference situation. Here we are.
Having 2 lighthouses along the coast of Vancouver Island without consultation. This jeopardizes emergency response, search and rescue, navigation, and more. Instead of supporting lightkeepers and the safety of our communities, the Liberals are choosing automated navigation systems. These cannot replace skilled people and sure don't hear distress cries. This move is dangerous. Will the Liberals halt this decision immediately and stop putting our coasts at risk?
L'honorable ministre des Pêches et Océans et la...
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are aware of the cultural and historic importance of these lighthouses. After a technical assessment carried out by the Coast Guard, it was determined that these lighthouses are no longer safe for staff. The safety and well-being of Coast Guard staff are our main priority.
Well, if it's your main priority, then how about we stop sending millions of dollars over to Ukraine and you send those millions of dollars to fix lighthouses?
The honourable member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Immigration who intervened to stop a deportation order issued by his own department upheld by a federal court to protect a 5-time criminally convicted foreign national, is it his latest scheme to protect the IRGC by allowing them to falsely claim the refugees? Global News reported that refugee privacy is being exploited.
I'm going to be real right now. I'm going to cut this guy off because he's independent, but why? No, not why. We shouldn't have people in the government. They can run as independent, but they should not just be labeled as independent. There should be a title of who they are actually representing and why. They shouldn't just be there as independent. And clearly he said something because everybody's going off right now.
Colleagues, on at least three.
He left the Liberal Party, so he's just like fucking free chilling now.
The chair has made rulings regarding associating members with odious regimes. This has gone on all sides of the House, and now with an independent member. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Fort York, Spadina, Fort York, to withdraw those words of that last part of that question. The honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw.
I thank the honourable member.
Kind of want to go back to hear what he said.
For Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our colleague raised GC. Our government has been very clear. The Iranian government is a state sponsor of terrorism. We have said that consistently. And Mr. Speaker, our government took the unprecedented step to list the IRGC as a terrorist entity under the Criminal Code of Canada. Mr. Speaker, our colleague understands very well that nobody in this House is going to discuss specific immigration cases, but he should have been happy that we listed that odious organization as a terrorist regime in Canada.
That's right.
So what have you done to get the terrorist regime out of Canada?
Very
much, Mr. Speaker. In the 2024 annual report to Parliament on immigration that was tabled earlier this day, we need to. I'm not asking for unanimous consent. However, I am asking for clarification from the chair, because in the information that was tabled, the printed version does not have Annex 4. However, there was a last-minute photocopy that was that seems to be inserted. So to you, Mr. Speaker, I am wanting to clarify which version of the report that the minister tabled earlier today was actually tabled, and whether or not the one that was tabled does have this last-minute photocopy with the numbers in it.
I have no idea what's going on right now. He didn't say questions or oral questions were done. We just went straight to point of order. Now the House is muted. You know what I realized? This guy sitting here in this chair, and this guy right here.
Before I entertain
these two guys right here, they look like the exact same fucking person.
the chair will take that information and come
That's
back
hilarious.
To the House. The Honourable Minister is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, je pense que c'est très important. I think it's really important
it's Randy.
that we saw
Mr.
a lack
Clean.
of respect, a clear lack of respect at this House of Commons to inaudible.
A who? Now Randy shows up.
I know.
Oh, man.
Order, please.
Colleagues, the chair.
Uh-oh.
I'll thank the honourable member.
Uh-oh.
If he would like to assume the chair, he's more than welcome.
Hey!
Colleagues, the chair has already made a statement on this matter during question period. I see that the honourable member from Brantford Brant would like to rise in this place. The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, in relation to the introduction of my second question, I made a reference to the question was originally in English. I was unable to hear the minister's response because of commotion in the House. My volume wasn't working correctly on my headpiece. That's why I made the reference. Clearly, I recognize, Mr. Speaker, that every member in this House is entitled to respond and ask questions in both official languages.
I thank the honourable member for reiterating the last point. I think, colleagues, I think this is the honourable member from Brantford Brant raises a very interesting point, which is that when people are taking the floor, when they're not. I say this to the conversation which is happening right now between the member from Pickering Uxbridge and the member from Lakelands. You cannot hear what is going on if there is too much ambient noise caused by people speaking out of turn. And this is a very important point. C'est un point.
It's a point that I have raised on several occasions, especially
I don't know if he's the Randy, but his name is Randy.
to the debate here in the chamber in the other official language through the interpretation services. It's so important for no one to speak out of turn so everyone can hear and understand what's happening here in the chamber. Point of order, the honourable member for Louisberg. Mr. Speaker, the member for Brentford Brant is clearly trying to step away from what he said. We all understood what he was trying to do, and he tried to suggest that that member for Quebec should not answer in French, and now he should apologize. It's inaudible.
The chair has heard enough points on this matter, and we are moving on.
As it is
Greg's like, I'm tired of your shit. It's time to move on.
deferred recorded division on the motion to concur in the 12th report of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Calling the members.
They definitely were a rowdy bunch today. Quite interesting. They typically aren't this crazy on a Thursday. It's usually a Wednesday or Monday type thing, or if they return from a long break. I don't know if we're doing a vote here or if they're just going straight to routine proceedings or whatever the case is. I've been live for almost 2 hours. Got people working on the roof of the house, so it's incredibly noisy right now. Okay.
La question est la suivante.
The question is as follows. Mr. Lemire, seconded by Ms. LaRouche, move that the 12th report of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage presented on Wednesday, June 19, 2024 be concurred in.
De 10 minutes pour les députés votant.
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started.
Safe sport in Canada. What does that even have to do with anything? Safe sport in Canada.
Ms. Tassi. Mr. Varani.
Mr. Varani.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. Scarpalegia.
Mr. Scarpalegia.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Madame Lalonde.
Madame Lalonde.
Mrs. Romanato.
Mrs. Romanato.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr.
So, safe sport meaning that biological men will compete against biological men and biological women will compete against biological women and there will be no crossover? Is that what this means? Or is it just cut and dry, like no doping, no PEDs, no whatever? Because I think that's kind of already across the board when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs or steroids or whatever.
McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Robillard.
Mr. Robillard.
Madame Shanahan.
Madame Shanahan.
Ms. Cedar Brampton South.
Ms. Cedar Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Ms. Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Ms. Yip.
Third party that will investigate complaints against coaches. Oh, okay. I see. Okay. That's why we have safe sport, mostly to prevent... Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. That absolutely makes sense. So this should be a unanimous vote across the board then. Right?
Mrs. Stubbs.
Ms. Lanceman.
Ms. Lanceman.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Ms. Dancho.
Ms. Dancho.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Couric.
Mr. Couric.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Abultaev.
Mr. Abultaev.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrari.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Macaulay-Edmonton West.
Mr. Macaulay-Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mrs. Goodridge.
Mrs. Goodridge.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Morantz.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Malillo.
Mr. Malillo.
Mrs. Cramp-Nyman.
Mrs. Cramp-Nyman.
Madame Vien.
Madame Vien.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Mazier.
Mr. Mazier.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Until you get to the block because it's not in Quebec's best interest. I don't even know what's in Quebec's best interest, to be honest with you, because they say they're for Quebecers specifically and only. They never speak about Canadians as a whole. It's kind of strange.
Kitchen.
Mr. Kitchen.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Madame Normandin.
Madame Normandin.
Mr. Garon.
Monsieur Garon.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Thériault.
Monsieur Thériault.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau.
Safe Sport has made it an offense to weigh your athletes. What? I don't know about that. That seems a bit ridiculous. Like, for example, if you're in some sort of boxing or MMA, you need to be in a weight category. Just because they all got anorexia in the 1990s. Huh. They're always for Quebecers and all Canadians, but Quebec is always queued first. Yeah. It's hard to believe that a provincial-only party can be federal. Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird. You get yelled at for gaining weight. No, you still weigh certain... Okay.
La Chambre attendra maintenant la fin.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Alright, so, electronic voting period has begun, as we just heard. I think I am going to end it here, as I probably just end it anyway after electronic voting period is done. I want to thank you all for stopping by today and joining me in another interesting day of question period. I will not be live tomorrow. I will be live. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the schedule. It is currently October the 24th. We have question period tomorrow, which I will not be covering, like I said. We have all next week into Friday of next week, which I will not be covering. I just don't cover Fridays. That's just not what I do. But we have a lot to go here left in the year. So let's see what happens. Let's see what our government and the rest of the MPs decide to do in the latter months of 2024. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your day or night wherever you are from, and I will see you next week. Or unless something crazy happens within the next few days. I don't know, but we shall see.